Welcome to Trudge the Road, brought to you by recoveryforlifechannel.com. We're your hosts. I'm Rich, and this is Jerry. Coming up, we're going to talk to Dr. Joe. Also, we'll be talking to Travis, someone that you know from the recovery community.
Yes, I do. You know, Dr. Joe Troncalli is going to speak a little bit, not necessarily so much about Al-Anon, but the family dynamics that are involved when, you know, you have somebody like you or me in your family and what we do to destroy it, and some great suggestions on how you might be able to repair it. So that's really important coming up.
We're also going to talk about didn't see it coming relapse triggers.
Right.
We all know what our triggers are. I mean, if I watch an episode of Cops and I see them bust somebody who's got a meth pipe and it's full and caked, obviously it's a trigger in my brain. Mm-hmm. It makes me start thinking about it. But the didn't see it coming relapse triggers, the ones that just kind of blindside you out of nowhere.
Just life on life's terms, sometimes that can be the case.
Absolutely. So those are things to watch for. But today we want to talk about the culture of AA and NA.
Absolutely. You know, and we are a family. Both programs, Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, are spiritual programs. And that's just the truth. You should know that up front. And a lot of the spirituality begins in the beginning. You'll feel it when you walk in the rooms because we understand something very significant, your pain. And the pain that we understand that you are as an addict experiencing is something that non-addicted people can make no relationship to whatsoever. And that's all right. But we can, and it is that bond that begins, that we understand. It's a very deep, deep understanding and very hard to define, but you'll feel it. And that's so much, you know, this is the disease of the emotions. And when you get into the rooms, you're going to feel that family, you'll feel that love, you'll feel that connection, you'll feel that understanding. And there's a slogan, you know, when one alcoholic reaches out for help, I am responsible to be of assistance to them, no matter what. You know, and I'm just going to give you a little story about how this program works.
Okay.
A friend of mine named Barry. Barry is from Chicago. This actually takes place, a story, in Atlanta. And this will give you an idea of our culture, of Alcoholics Anonymous. Barry was on a flight coming back to Chicago. And if you've ever been to Hartsfield International Airport in Atlanta, it's a monster.
Been there, yes.
It's huge. And, for example, by the time you check into your flight, walk down the terminal to the security, go through security, then you've got to walk down another terminal, get on a train, and that train will take you out to where your flight is going to take place. So, you know, you're looking at least 30 minutes by the time you get there till you're sitting waiting for your flight. All right, so Barry had a little bit of extra time. He was early and got out there, went through security, you know, down the terminal, on the train, got to where his flight was going to be, and he had about 90 minutes, and so he thought he'd get himself a cup of coffee. And Barry, by the way, at that time, 25 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, works a fantastic program. Anyway, he's sitting there drinking his cup of coffee, and over the paging system, he hears this. Would a friend of Dr. Bob or Bill's please see the man at the Northwest checkout carousel? Now, Dr. Bob, that's our code words. You see, Bill W. and Dr. Bob were the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's kind of how we refer to each other, cloak and dagger, if you will. Well, he hears this in the middle of Hartsfield International Airport. What? You know, that's for me, you know? And he looks up, and there it is, the proverbial white telephone. And he picks it up and said, I apologize. I just heard an announcement for somebody to see. And the lady interrupted. Someone wants to see a friend of Dr. Bob or Bill's at the Northwest checkout carousel. Oh, I got to go. I am responsible. Now, let me tell you what had happened here is that this cat who was making this call had been fired from his job over the telephone at the airport. He's not at home. He's thousands of miles away from home. He has a pocket full of money. He's just been fired, and he wants to drink big time. So he just sends this message out. So Barry gathers up his stuff, starts hauling down that terminal. Of course, he's on like gate B350, you know, all the way down to the train, get back on the train, go all the way down the train to the train terminal, down that terminal, past where the security point is, down the next terminal to, of course, where the checkout is, and all the time thinking, I've got to get there, I've got to help this guy, I've got to help this guy, and almost frantic, and it's a long trip, and as he's going down the escalator right down to where the carousels are there at Hartsfield, he turns to his left, he sees Northwestern, the sign there, he looks, he sees one man standing there, surrounded by about 125 people.
Wow.
That's Alcoholics Anonymous. People walked away from flights. That's how much we care about each other, and that is the extent we will go to help another alcoholic who is suffering. And when you're on the verge of taking a drink, believe me, you are suffering, because it's that fear and that pain that you want to kill. You don't want to drink. And it's just proof of God as I choose to understand him. You know, this guy said, you know, Lord, help me. He saw that phone, he made that call, and God sent the cavalry. And that gets back to what I talked about originally, is spirituality being what this program is. And, you know, we certainly have nothing against religion. I mean, we're all for it, anything. But for us, we look at it this way: religion, you know, man-made, and spirituality is a gift from God. And for us, it's a level of communication. And I'll give you another example. When I was a student many, many years ago, in recovery and working full-time as a chemical dependency counselor, I was going to a major university, and I was at what was called an 11-step meeting. It was a Sunday night meeting. And while I was there, I noticed the chair of the department of theology and philosophy at this major university was there. One of the most brilliant men, if not the most brilliant man I've ever met. He holds 3 PhDs, and he's a rabbi. And he's just cool, Dr. Dave, you know. And
it's a cool name.
Yeah, it was, you know.
Dr. Dave.
But I see him at an AA meeting, not over at the university. You're on my turf, bro.
Right.
You know, and I just was, well, I could never have imagined that he was one of us. So I walked up to him, and you know, and I said, Doctor, I had no idea that you were an alcoholic. And he said, oh, outside of sacramental wine, I've never had a drink of alcohol in my life. And I had to ask the obvious question, you know, what are you doing here? You know, why are you here? And he said this to me, and it's absolutely true of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. Listen to me carefully. This is what he said. He said, Jerry, I absolutely believe that God is in the temple. I absolutely believe that God is in the cathedral. But I know God is in Alcoholics Anonymous because I come here and I hear him. And that is how God communicates to us, is through each other within the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. Ladies and gentlemen, that is how we get better. And we get better one day at a time with that communication to God, however you choose to define or understand him. It's a power greater than ourselves. You see, that was the problem. My problem wasn't alcohol and drugs. My problem was no power. There was no power in my life to live by. It was just me making one bad decision after another. And to just accept this power, whatever it may be, however you want to define it. And of course, in my own recovery, it has certainly changed God as I choose to understand him, to the point now where it's simply conscious contact. Now, when I first got here, it was really important. I should tell you, I was brought up a very traditional Catholic. I held no resentment against Catholicism. They were wonderful to me, educated me, only wanted the best for me. It was just that particular type of theology that was going on at that time, which was in the 60s and 70s, where it was still kind of the mean God, the punishing God. And that was the God that I knew, and that was very difficult for me to think that he was going to help me.
Right.
You know, so I simply changed the way that I believed in God. And it all happened in Louisville, Kentucky, in the African-American community. As you know, that's where I got sober. I was the only white boy. And we were living in a homeless shelter. And on Sundays, my roommate, Tracy B's grandmother, would let us come over and do the wash. You know, and afterwards, they were at church. They'd come home from church, and it was like they'd been at an amusement park. They were just so thrilled and happy. And again, I'm not saying anything negative about Catholicism, but when we came home from Mass, it was like, who's going to cut their wrist first? You know? And I don't mean to be mean, but I asked. I said, why is it so? Why are you coming back from church so different? And she said, we believe God is love and music and joy. And I thought, well, maybe you've got a point there. Now, that doesn't mean that I became an immediate member of the AME Zion Baptist Church, but I began to think a little bit differently. You know, and Grandma B, she told me at this time, and I'll never forget it, because I was talking about God's will. What is God's will for me? And I'm an alcoholic, you know. It was only to, you know, my assumption was I'd have to go over and take Mother Teresa's place. You know? Right. No, not the case. She said, God's will is, she said, Jerry, what's that prayer you say at the end of the meeting, the Lord's Prayer? And she goes, how does that start? I said, Our Father. She goes, do you believe God is your Father? And I said, I can look at it that way, yes. And she said, your Father, what's your will for your child? And I said, my will for her is to be happy, healthy, prosper. And she said, that's God's will for you. You are his child. There's no expectations on you. You are his child, and God has no grandchildren. And that made absolute sense to me. And I said, thank you so much, Miss B, for helping me out. I really appreciate that. And she said to me, why don't you call me by my first name? And I said, I'm sorry, I don't even know what your first name is. And she said, Hope. And that's the end of my story.
That's a great story. Actually, all three of them were great stories.
I didn't mean to go off like that.
No, absolutely. They were all very compelling stories, and I think you made some great points about AA and NA and the culture and how it is a family.
It is love.
And you know, a couple of weeks ago, we had talked to someone, little Joe, who had come in here, former heroin addict and Oxycontin guy, and how he had talked about connectedness. And,
exactly.
And you become connected. When you become a part of AA and NA and you meet these people, you become connected with them. And that is so important as you go through life, is to become connected to positive people and positive influences. You know, and I had mentioned to you on the side about a family member that was having trouble with getting into NA and AA because he was afraid to go in there and he thought people would reject him. And I said, you know what you need to do? You need to just go in there. You won't be rejected. You'll be embraced, and get connected with these people. Because for years now, you've been connected to people who are leading you down a wrong path. Now, granted, you're a big boy. You're going down that path yourself. But these people are not helping you. When you go here and you connect with these people, they're going to lead you down a positive path.
Look what they did for you and me.
Absolutely. You know, I can sit here with over 10 years myself, and I am a completely different person than I was back in that July of 2001. I was a mess.
You're a different person than you were 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
And I mean that real positively. We grow a day's growth in a day's time, but, you know, one day, then a week, then a month, then a year, and look at the results.
Well, I encourage anyone that's listening right now that's thinking about it. Do it.
Do it.
Just do it. Don't think, oh, well, maybe. Just go do it. Just go do it.
You'll love it.
Absolutely. And you can also find some information if you're looking for a meeting by going to our website, which is recoveryforlifechannel.com. We also have a Twitter page. It's RFL Channel. And on Facebook, you can just type in Recovery for Life Channel, and there we are.
Coming up, we've got my friend Travis. Travis is a heroin addict. He's got 8 months clean. I was there the day he walked in. He's got a great story, and that's coming up next for you on Trudge the Road from the recoveryforlifechannel.com.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Jerry talks with Travis, a heroin addict with 8 months clean time under his belt on the Trudge the Road radio network.
Welcome back to Trudge the Road from the recoveryforlifechannel.com. I'm Jerry, sober alcoholic, and my friend Travis is here. Travis, thank you very much for coming by today.
It's my pleasure. You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Takes some guts, man, to do this, and I do appreciate it. I've known Travis for 8 months. Travis, you're a heroin addict. I'm not going to take your inventory or tell your story, but just, you know, who and what you are. 8 months ago, you came into the rooms. I saw you. I've watched you, and it's been a miraculous recovery for you so far. But I want to go back and talk a little bit about your childhood and your first experiences with alcohol were at an extremely young age. Tell us about that.
Well, the first time I ever had a drink, I was 3. I spent a lot of time with my godparents. I was raised with a single mother. She had been remarried a few times in the first 5 years of my life, so the main stability was with my godparents. And around 3, my godfather was playing poker with some friends, and he had a keg of beer that he kept, you know, in the basement. Mm-hmm. So there was always beer in the house. And I guess they thought it'd be funny to get a little boy drunk. So I was given the opportunity to drink Dixie cups of beer for $0.25. So every Dixie cup of beer I drank, I got $0.25. I had no idea the effects of alcohol, so I was drinking as much as possible. I just wanted those quarters, so I just kept drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking until I couldn't drink anymore. And I went out in the living room, sat down to watch The Incredible Hulk, and threw up all over myself.
That was drinking experience number 1. All
Right.
right. Now, we're not going to get into a lot of details, but there was abuse for you as a child, mm-hmm. and you suffered a great deal. And that's not necessarily the cause of your addiction, but it certainly does play a significant role. Would you agree with that?
Emotionally, it has had a lot to do with the way I felt about myself,
mm-hmm.
and trying to escape those feelings with alcohol and drugs.
Now, when you talk about escaping those feelings, take us to that first time where it worked, that first time where all of a sudden you realized that this alcohol and or drugs, whatever it may have been at the time, was the answer to my problems.
I was 13 years old. I had a huge argument with my father. I was adopted, and we had a huge argument. We butted heads quite often, and I decided I was going to run away. So he had a huge refrigerator full of beer at all times in the garage. So I got a big gym bag, filled it with beer, and ran away into the woods, which was about maybe 5 blocks from my house. Right. So I started drinking, and I was with a group of friends. And what I found is, after a few beers, all the anxiety and worry and fear and anger was gone. And everything felt all right.
Normal. See, ladies and gentlemen, he has just said something there incredibly significant. To the non-alcoholic who experiences this type of inebriation for the first time, it's usually the giggly, the spins, the typical reaction you would expect out of somebody who has for the first time used alcohol. That is the difference between you and me. My story is exactly the same. The first time that I used it, and it worked. It solved the problems that we didn't really know we had, and you went over them: anxiety, fear, all of that compels us to continue to take a drink and to continue to take a drug. So you have found the solution now at 13 years of age, very, very young. Where does it take you from here?
Well, at this point, I began drinking on weekends. I wanted to feel free. I always had the tendency to be very serious, is what I've been told by my family, and I worry. When I take the drink, that goes away.
Mm-hmm. That's sensitivity and fear, Mm-hmm. That's what and that's the significant aspects of our personality. Those of us who were addicted,
and that's the case for me. I was always very sensitive, and even to this day, I'm extremely sensitive. But I have more tools to handle that sensitivity today.
Well, I'll
thanks
tell you,
to the program.
With sensitivity, I've got some good news for you and some bad news. The good news is you're sensitive. The bad news is you're sensitive. All right. Now, I'm going to assume that it went from weekends to a more regular basis, and that, of course, using alcohol.
It went to a daily thing, especially when I began smoking weed. Mm-hmm. With alcohol, I'd feel ill the next day. To me, at that time, the solution to that illness was not to drink more. It was just I didn't like the feeling. Mm-hmm. So I began smoking weed regularly and maintained drinking on weekends, because I had more time to recuperate and didn't have responsibilities of going to school or baseball practice, or a paper route, which I had a paper route, and all these things alcohol would interfere with. But with weed, I could just do everything as if I was sober, basically, is the way it felt.
Well,
I felt like
still an escape mechanism. You're not exactly crisp out there, but you're functioning, so to speak. Right.
But to me, it made the world the place I wanted it to be, and it made me feel the way I wanted to feel, which was peaceful. And that's what it did for me.
Would you answer this honestly? Was that what you were seeking the whole time? I mean, you look at it, were we looking to get buzzed? Were we looking to party? Were we looking to be crazy? Or were you looking for some peace of mind, some serenity?
It was peace of mind. Mm-hmm. That's what I was looking for, and that's what it gave me. So I continued to seek it out and use it.
Now, I'm going to assume that it didn't work after a while, or you needed something else to be able to maintain that feeling of conviviality or peacefulness, and that's when you changed up drugs.
Absolutely. I tried every drug in excess. I would go from one drug to the next and abuse them until they no longer did for me what I needed them to do.
Now, you're our first guest on Trudge the Road who had an issue with club drugs. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I guess it was about 16 or 17. LSD was really popular, became really popular when I was in my teens. Mm-hmm. That kind of grew into, ketamine, ecstasy, methamphetamine. At the time I was a teen and into my early 20s, I was really strong methamphetamine called Glass, which was like the purest methamphetamine that had been produced. So that would be kind of when I was coming down from the ecstasy or ketamine and had to drive, I would get the Glass to stay awake. It would just be a little pen cap, and it was like an explosion of energy, and it was incredible how strong it was. So with the club drugs, they became basically, they took over between 17 and 20. Mm-hmm. And I abused ecstasy heavily and LSD.
Now, you have a career, a musical career, a background in music, and you ended up in Florida pursuing that. And this is where you were introduced to yet another drug. Could you take us to that? And, of course, we're talking about heroin.
Correct. Well, I had used heroin here and there sparsely as a teenager in Philadelphia, where I got my drugs. Everything was available, and I stumbled upon heroin. Like, I knew what it was, but I did not go to the ghetto intending to get heroin that day.
Let me take you back. Did you start off with heroin, or did you go with more of the prescription drug route first, oxys, things of that nature?
Well, I had some serious accidents, so I had already been introduced to oxycodone, and I loved it. When I was in the hospital after a car accident, I was given oxycodone. Man, did I feel good. It was it. For me, that feeling, when I took that first drink, it was the first time another drug had done that for me.
It provided that feeling.
Absolutely, and it was unmatched,
so
unrivaled.
The chase is on now.
At that point, I knew that I loved it, but having a heroin addict in the family, I knew that I didn't want to be like him, So I kind of shied away from it, but I would take prescription pills here and there if they were around. If a family member had some oral surgery or anything, if they were in the cabinet, they disappeared pretty quickly because I took them.
Right.
So I knew that I liked opiates, but I had no desire to do heroin because of my uncle. So when I'm in the ghetto in Kensington, in Philadelphia, and I'm there to get cocaine and weed, and this guy comes up to me, he looks like a homeless guy, and he says, "Hey, family," and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "It's dope." And I said, "How much?" That was my response. "How much?" He said 10 apiece, and I said, "Give me 3." So I left there with the cocaine, the weed, and 3 bags of heroin. I went to a friend of mine, to her apartment in Philadelphia, in South Philly, and between myself and 2 friends, we shared a bag of dope, sniffing the dope.
Snorting it, yeah.
And the world became a beautiful place.
For a minute.
Yeah, and it was just the most incredible feeling I've ever felt. I had, to that point, felt in my life. There was a description in a drugstore cowboy, and he says the world took on a rosy hue. And that is exactly the way I felt. The world took on a rosy hue. A place that I didn't like too much, which was planet Earth. My life became beautiful, and I loved it.
The most ultimate, in a false sense of security, of course,
Absolutely.
that there possibly is.
Absolutely.
All right, now I'm sure that at this stage you're chasing the drug. Heroin's illegal. It's incredibly expensive. You're married. You've got a career. Do we lose everything?
In Florida?
Yes.
It took a little while, but yeah, it all piece by piece disappeared. I had built, a studio, a college degree. I'm in the midst of attaining a college degree. Bought a house, property, 2 cars.
The American dream.
The American dream, which, I was told my whole life would make me happy.
Right.
But I'm not happy.
Miserable.
My solution to this American dream was heroin. That's where I was.
All right, it took you. How did you get out of Florida and back to Philly?
Well, I was faced with an ultimatum from my wife. It became apparent that I was spending incredibly ridiculous amounts of money
On the heroin.
And
so the ultimatum was me or the heroin.
Right.
Which one did you choose?
Well, for me, honestly, there wasn't a choice. I couldn't imagine a life without the heroin.
Right.
And so
I don't want to interrupt you, but ladies and gentlemen, that's addiction. When the drug will overrule somebody, and I know that you absolutely love this woman, but the drug
absolutely.
was more important.
To this day, I've not met a better woman, but there was no choice between the two. I couldn't live without the heroin.
Mm-hmm. All right, now bring us to where you found me. What happened?
Well, the time I met you, I had just come off a really long, serious run. I had nowhere to live. I didn't have anything to my name. I was living off of other people's kindness and any way I could use anyone, committing crimes,
Certainly.
Doing whatever I had to do. For whatever reason, I just got this overwhelming feeling that I just didn't want to live like that anymore. I was tired.
An overwhelming feeling that you didn't want to live this way anymore. Would you call that a moment of, clarity?
You could call it that, but I call it today I view it as a gift from God.
Okay.
And to me, I don't know what separates me from other people, because there's a lot of people that are out there that are dead from this disease that haven't been given that gift. But for whatever reason, I've been given that gift where I didn't want to live like that anymore.
I saw you in the detox center, again, not taking your inventory, just the reality. You looked terrible. You were obviously very, very frightened and didn't have a lot of hope.
No, hope was definitely not a part of the equation.
Yeah. What was your motivation to continue to try to stay clean and sober?
The way I saw it, I really didn't have much to lose. because I wanted to die. I just didn't want to live like that. I had given this AA thing a chance prior to this and was clean for about 7 months. So I had felt the benefits of living a spiritual life. And I think sometimes, in a sense, that was even harder because I had already experienced what it felt like and threw it away. And that didn't make a lot of sense to me, why someone like me would choose to throw that away. Like, how could a sane, sober person make the decision to pick up heroin again? And I didn't understand that. But I also had this sense of doom, like, do I ever have a chance to get this thing? Is it possible for me, or am I the constitutionally incapable person they speak about and how it works before every meeting? So what did I have to lose? I just didn't want to be like that anymore. And what's the alternative? To kill myself?
Right.
And I'm not going to do that. I made that decision a long time ago that I don't want to kill myself. So I was going to try. And even though I was afraid and didn't have a lot of hope, like you said, I was just going to give it a try. And if I went to bed sober each night, I had a chance.
No, I've watched you come here trudging the road to a happy destiny with absolutely nothing. And in the last 8 months, you've got a place to live now, your own place to live. You've got a pretty good job. It's got some benefits. You're clean and sober for 8 months. Tell us a little bit more about what's going on in your life.
I've lost my driver's license for a long time. So it's been 2003 since I've had it. And there were things I did, accidents without car insurance, DUIs,
right,
or a DUI, which initially is why I lost the license. And I've owed, large amounts of money in order to get that on track. And here I sit today, just waiting for the letter from PennDOT
to get your license back.
Right. And it's been almost 10 years.
Wow, that's a major accomplishment. Now you can use that opportunity to take other people to meetings.
Correct. That's the plan.
You mentioned, and it is in the literature, being constitutionally incapable of being honest with ourselves. That if you can ask yourself that question, you're not. So we can take that one off the table. How do you feel today? I mean, you look very healthy. I know that you're very active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I know you're active in Narcotics Anonymous. You've got a lot of friends, and you're working hard, and there seems to be a bit of a sparkle in your eye. Is the hope there today, young man?
Absolutely. I have so much hope for the future and for now. I try to stay in the moment because that's what I'm taught to do.
Yes, it is.
And I try not to get too far ahead of myself. But right now, in this moment, I have a lot of hope. And I see that anything's possible as long as I continue to stay sober and help others.
Do you believe that anybody who has the willingness to get clean and sober, and I'll emphasize the willingness, can?
Yes.
I agree.
I mean, if myself and a lot of the friends I have can do it, then there's no way that anyone can't do this.
Would you still classify yourself as a miracle?
I don't think I would, but I've been told I am.
You are. I will tell you that. You're a good man. I appreciate you coming by here today and being so honest. And I know that what you've said today around the United States is going to help other people. Thank you, Travis.
You're welcome.
Hope to have you back again soon. You're listening to Trudge the Road, brought to you by the recoveryforlifechannel.com. We'll be back in a moment.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Rich and Jerry discuss Didn't See It Coming triggers on the Trudge the Road radio network.
Welcome back to Trudge the Road from the recoveryforlifechannel.com. We're your hosts. I'm Rich. This is Jerry, and great interview with Travis.
Good kid, man.
Yeah.
I'm very anxious to continue to bring him back to this program as we watch his recovery continue.
We also have Dr. Joe coming up in just a little bit. But this segment, wanted to talk a little bit about didn't see it coming relapse triggers. You didn't see it coming. We all have our little triggers, little things that remind us of our time when we were out there.
Sure.
I think I mentioned earlier in the show, if I'm watching Cops or Intervention or any one of those cable shows that's on TV that shows somebody using, it does flicker something inside of me that makes me do a little mental relapse in my head. But there's those unexpected triggers that come around. And I found a little listing someone had put together together, and I'll just touch on a couple of them, Jerry. I'd love to get your thoughts on them. Sex and relationships. You know how in AA you're supposed to wait a year before you jump back into another relationship.
It is suggested. It's not in the literature, but it is suggested that you wait. And I think that there's a specific reason why, is that addiction is the disease of the emotions. And it's just impossible to walk into the recovering community without having a broken heart. It's impossible. That's what you're suffering from. It's a broken heart. And to think that you can play in the game of love with a broken heart, you're gravely mistaken. I'll give you an example. If an athlete, a football player, has a broken leg, he can't play football. You've got a broken heart. To think that you're going to be able to successfully involve yourself in a romantic relationship it just isn't the case. It's not true. It takes time for that heart to repair, for you to be able to gain your emotional sense back so that you, frankly, have something to offer.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of people are out that jump right back into a relationship or trying to fulfill an emotional need that perhaps is lacking at that point. And, you know, the high of a new relationship turns into a substitute for drugs or alcohol.
Exactly. We're always looking for something on the outside to make us feel better on the inside. This is an inside job. It's not an outside job. Let me just give you a couple of quick examples. I've had friends of mine in recovery who have gotten stinking rich. I mean, rich, rich, rich beyond all means, you know? And I've said, did that fix that hole? You know, I'm pointing to myself. Did that fix it right there? You okay now because you got all this money? No. I want to hang myself on my yacht. I still feel the exact same. Terrible. I know people who have become so physically fit they could qualify for the Olympics. Same question. Did it fix it? Did it fix that feeling inside, that one deep in the stomach? Are you okay now because you're, you know, this magnificent physical specimen? No. I want to hang myself on my Bowflex. It is an inside job, and we will look for outside means to try and make us feel better, and it's really kind of natural. That's why sponsorship is so important. In my particular case, it was the buffet table that I fell in love with. Yeah. You know, it was food, and I just, you know, continued my addiction that way for a while. And it's not necessarily something I think like to freak out about immediately, but to understand that we'll switch addictions as opposed to deal with that inside job, which, as Dr. Joe puts it so perfectly, counterintuitive, doing things we don't want to do so that we get better, and it does work.
Well, I also think that when you go out and you are looking to fulfill that emotional need, that sometimes you're attracted to people who will be like the person perhaps you were with when you were using, and you tend to go back down that road trying to find someone who perhaps is infatuated or controlling or someone you can easily manipulate. Whereas, you know, when you're good and you're at peace and you're solid emotionally, as you've given yourself this time, you're more likely to attract someone who shares those same qualities, which is basically what you're going to need as you go forward.
Absolutely. Look at my record, look at my record, look at my record. It was as if I did the same thing over and over. It's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over again, expecting different results. Or as our definition is, and we know today, doing the same thing over again, knowing exactly what's going to happen.
Exactly.
And it's always a negative outcome. So taking advice and doing things that they are suggested to you in the programs of Alcoholics Anonymous, like staying out of a relationship for a year's period of time to recuperate, is really good advice.
Absolutely. Heal yourself. Now, that is one didn't see it coming trigger. Another one listed as a promotion or a new job, something I can completely relate to. I got a new job back in 1998. Went to it, was feeling elated, feeling celebratory.
Successful?
Oh, exactly, and wanted to share it. I had moved back to a place where I was living prior, so here I am coming back. I'm the king now. Got myself a new gig. I'm a high-profile morning guy. Want to share it with other people. They want to celebrate as well. Hey, they knew me back before when I was good time rich. I had gone away. I had gotten myself all cleaned up, all sober, got a couple of years under my belt, and got the new job, and boom, reconnected with these people, and I was right back at it. Didn't see it coming. There it was.
People, places, and things. You know, those we've got to change if we want to be clean and sober. And sometimes that's really difficult, if not almost impossible, to break away from those elements, those people, those places we used to go to, and those things we held on to. Again, counterintuitive. It's difficult, but it is so incredibly necessary for you to be able to live a normal, happy, healthy life. And we can do that, and we will give you those elements in a healthy form within the recovering community. New people, new places, new things that will provide for you what you're looking for, peace of mind.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what I talked about earlier in the first segment about connectedness and who you connect to. I was reconnecting with people I shouldn't have been reconnecting rather than connecting with people I should have been connecting with.
Perfect.
Another one that folks don't see coming is when you get complacent or you get overconfident.
Ooh.
Guilty. Anybody with a little bit of time under their belt, such as myself, can get to feeling confident. I feel confident right now. I'm sitting here right now looking at you, and I'll tell you right now that I am not going to use any time in this coming year. But I have to look at it one day at a time. Exactly. I don't know what this evening is going to hold for me. I don't know what it's going to be like when I go home and I stop and I get an iced tea on my way home or pick up a pack of smokes. Who am I going to run into there? I don't know. It's when these unexpected people come into your life or unexpected circumstances come into your life is when you really have to be on top of your game.
Absolutely, and that's what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous will supply as a foundation for you to be able to encounter situations like that and walk away successfully. We go a little bit further within the program to talk about spirituality and how the intervention of God can and does take place. And in my own life, where I have been on the edge, where, I want to use that drug or I want to take that drink, and everything says so, and yet I walk away, I know that is a direct intervention by a power greater than myself, and it will happen. But then this again is all the foundations of your program of recovery, the 12 steps of AA and NA.
And if you're forgetting, maybe you need to get back out to a meeting. You run into these people, and then all of a sudden those old feelings surface again. Get to a meeting. Call your sponsor. Get in touch with somebody who you are connected with, and they can help you get through this process before you make a mistake, and then you end up like me with another 2-3 year fall down the hole.
Or worse, dead. That's ultimately what this disease has in store for you, is your death. And you look at everybody in this room except for Matt, our producer, is an addicted person. One of three things was going to happen to us. We were going to end up institutionalized, sober, or dead. 1, 2, or 3. We're here today sober. Doesn't mean we're going to be that way tomorrow. But we do have at least a little bit of time behind us that has given us a foundation to be able to live successfully one more day. Not for the next 23 years. I've been sober 23 years. Doesn't guarantee anything. And don't be impressed by the fact I haven't had a drink or a drug in 23 years. I beg of you, only be concerned about now not how long it's been since my last drink, just how close I am to my next one.
I always thought that was a great saying. You had told me that probably a year ago.
It's true. There has been sober 23 years or 23 days. Who's closer to the drink? I promise you, there are times when I was sober 20 years and on the edge, and I was in a treatment center dealing with some guy who was sober 20 days who was a mile away from a drink. That kind of levels the playing field when it comes to this time thing.
Well, another thing you might want to watch out for, and I think we can all relate to this, is boredom. Oh. You get bored. You're sitting around. Maybe in my circumstance where I was talking about watching TV. You see one of those little triggers on TV. Maybe I could get away with this just one time.
Right, like I can will myself clean or sober tomorrow. You know what the problem is? You know what it is? I'm serious about it. We don't know how to have fun. Alcoholics and drug addicts don't know how to have fun. What's fun to you? Whiskey and blow. That's got to be there for fun, and we absolutely have to learn. Let me give you an example. Burns, my sponsor, had this rule of thumb. We're going to go learn how to have fun, and we're going to take an element and we're going to do it twice because you're an alcoholic and you're programmed to hate it the first time or to mess it up in some manner. And we came across a couple of ideas of what we could do, and we decided on going bowling. Now, as a drinker, bowling was the place you went when you ran out of everywhere else to go. And all right, we're going to go. And we went bowling, and here's the alcoholic mind, is I was at first just, this is horrible. It's noisy and children, and this is awful. And they gave me the ball, and I walked up, and I tossed that baby down the lane, and I smashed a strike like you couldn't believe, and I said to myself, ooh, you're pretty good. All right. Got up there again, pow, another strike. Holy moly, I think I'm a natural. Got up there, third, boom, 3 strikes in a row. Well, it was obvious to me at that point what God's plan was for me, professional bowler. Well, 3 strikes, I'm already a professional bowler. Now I'm thinking, I'm looking at the guys around me. I don't want him. I don't want him on my entourage. What kind of a car? I should probably drive a Corvette. No, that's not bowling. A Cadillac Escalade, that would probably look more. And we're going to, I think we'll base ourselves out of Vegas. And we won't wear these stupid bowling shirts. We're going to get some really good bowling shirts, So here I am already. I've bowled 3 strikes in a row, and I'm world champion. I've got a career. I've got people on the entourage, And then things started going downhill. Didn't bowl any more strikes, and there were a couple of gutter balls in there. At the end of the evening, everybody else had had a good time. Not me. I had lost a career and a world championship. That's alcoholism, And I'm being really serious. So, but again, Dr. Brady, they say we're going to go back and try it the second time, And the second time we went back, I just had a good time, But that's why we've got to learn, because we're crazy as the day is long, or at least as that example proves that I am.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, what a great story, too, because I could see the excitement. Because after that 3rd strike, if you didn't get a strike from that point forward, this night sucks.
Exactly. That's it.
It sucks. I only got 9. I didn't pick up the spare. It's just not as exciting because we, as addicts and alcoholics, everything has to be to the extreme. It has to be wild.
Exactly.
And you had mentioned whiskey and blow. Well, yeah, throw some strippers in there because I'll tell you something.
That's us in a nutshell. And the beauty of it today is that within my family, of my recovering family of Alcoholics Anonymous, we go bowling all the time, have a wonderful time. We go out to comedy clubs. We have a wonderful time. I mean, we live life. We enjoy life. We didn't just get sober and sit around and wait for God to come get us. Heck no. We want to have some fun, and we want to have a lot more fun. And we want you to join us on our recovery, and we've got more information about how you can participate on the recoveryforlifechannel.com.
Yes, this is Trudge the Road. You can also catch us on Twitter, which is RFL Channel. Put that in your search engine. And on Facebook, Recovery for Life Channel. Hey, Dr. Joe's coming up here in just a few minutes. This is Trudge the Road.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Dr. Joe talks about the family, codependency, and Al-Anon on the Trudge the Road radio network.
Welcome back to Trudge the Road from the recoveryforlifechannel.com. I'm Jerry, and with me is our resident professional, Dr. Joseph Troncale, who, as a physician, treats people like me, and I certainly do appreciate that. Not a lot of doctors do.
It's all my pleasure, Jerry.
Especially one who is not addicted, a proud member of Al-Anon. And I thought today maybe we would have you address some of the issues that are so incredibly important in regards to the family, and that certainly is an area of your expertise. Emptiness of the family, the closeness, the structure, the addicted person, and the problems that we raise within the family structure are just very difficult to describe because they're so incredible. Can you kind of piece together exactly that family and maybe some of the solutions that are involved?
Well, one of the things that I think we've tempted to talk about in the past is the whole thing that people are unwittingly brought into addiction, whether you're the addict or whether you're the family member or whether you're somebody even in law enforcement, or somehow you get sucked into the whole vortex of addiction without
lawyers and things.
Everybody's involved, but nobody really wants to be there. It's kind of like a black hole. And if I ever wrote a book, it would be like Addiction from 360 Degrees or something like that, because really, literally, there's this black hole of addiction, and people are brought into it without really either being aware of it. And I was actually thinking about this today with family members and that sort of thing, that there's this time in family members' lives when they know something is wrong, but they don't know that addiction is involved. Mm-hmm. Money's disappearing, or somebody's not acting right, or people are wondering what in the world is going on with this other person, and they don't know that it's actually addiction. And then they find out it really is addiction, and then they don't know what to do with it. And then they're in their own state of denial, just like the addict is, and that sort of thing. So you've got all of these forces that are emotional forces going on all at the same time. Everybody's a player in this whole thing, whether they're the employer or whether they're the spouse or whether they're the addict or whether they're children in the family and that sort of thing. And so everybody's trying trying to make sense out of what this craziness is. And the business of trying to help people, whether they're people who are on the addiction side or whether they're on the codependency side or whether they're an employer, for instance, is to try to help them make sense out of what's going on.
All right. Now, let me take it back to, I'm going to go right out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, is that, and Shakespeare is quoted by Bill, is all the world's a stage and you are my players. I am the director. Now, as the addicted person within the family, and just citing my own experience, it was everything I could do to make you act the way that I wanted you to act so that I could get what I wanted. I realize that's kind of convoluted, but does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so, again, I was actually talking with, I think, one of your future guests on the show earlier about the part of the brain that basically is uncontrolled by logical thinking, which is totally unleashed in addiction. Really, what addiction represents is the disconnection between logic and animalistic sorts of behavior. So when somebody's in active addiction, all they're doing basically is survival techniques by any means. And if you're a clever human being and you're an addict, then basically you're very dangerous and you're capable of basically anything. And you can ask anybody who's dealt with an addict and they'll tell you that they can't believe what either came out of their mouth or what kind of behavior they engaged in or what kind of trouble they got themselves in or whatever, mainly because what was going on is the door was wide open for all kinds of mayhem and anything could happen. So the person who is trying to deal with the addict is helpless if they're trying to have a relationship with the addict because the addict is incapable of having a meaningful relationship when they're active in their addiction. They're going to do whatever it takes to basically satisfy their addictive desires. They really might have a lot of good lip service towards the person that they're seemingly having a relationship with, but the relationship, believe me, is not on the table. For the addict, the only thing that's on the table is continuing in their addictive behavior and figuring out ways to gain their substance of choice.
You have mentioned to me one time before we were having a conversation about sanity will not tolerate insanity, insanity won't tolerate sanity. And why does insanity win? Why was I able to first lose a complete level of conscience? You know me. You've only known me as a sober person. I'm a good man. But in my cups, if you will, anything went. There was no conscience. And I just still to this day really don't understand chemically what was going on in my brain that caused that.
Well, again, once you're in active addiction, the logical part of your brain is completely disconnected from that part of your brain, which is the addicted sort of survival side of your brain. So you're going to do whatever it takes, and logic is not going to play a part in it. And that's why it's so hard for people who are spouses or have some sort of a relationship with an alcoholic or addict, because they're trying to relate to a part of the brain that the addict is not able to access at that particular time.
Okay, so we're in this black hole of addiction, and it's an issue of now feelings basically controlling what is the momentum of the family. Am I not correct?
That's correct. And if I could just say this, one of my old mentors used to say that if you wrestle with pigs, you get dirty and the pigs enjoy it. And that's actually exactly what's happening with addiction, because people are jumping into the addict's world, attempting to either save them, help them, relate to them, or whatever. And basically, the addict is in a pile of mud, and all anybody's doing at that point is getting dirty. And the addict's really okay with that because they're completely disconnected from whatever cleanliness would be, you know.
Sure.
But everybody else is being drug into this unwittingly or wittingly or whatever. But nobody wants to be down there in the mud except they're all finding themselves now sullied.
All right, now it's at a point where I guess to assume responsibility for oneself or one's feelings and get out of the mud. What is that process?
Well, again, getting sober requires that somebody basically get the substances out of their brain and body so that they can actually, when they talk about in the program having a spiritual awakening, in my mind, part of at least what they're talking about is that when somebody gets sober and actually realizes the damage they've done, the harm that they've caused, all these sorts of things, at some level, they begin to reconnect with what we would consider sort of normal life. Now, not everybody obviously has a moment of clarity and then immediately changes their life. Sometimes that takes months, years, decades. Sometimes people will never actually probably come to that place. But the capacity to do that really is completely reliant on the person being able to access that part of the brain, which we would either call the conscience or the logical system, and the only way you can do that is by being sober.
Now, what about the family? Now, they don't have a problem with drugs and alcohol, yet assuming responsibility for their own feelings, I think, is also quite a conquest.
Absolutely. And again, if you're a faithful member of Al-Anon, or if you study Al-Anon, the mantra really is that you have to take responsibility for yourself and your own actions. What happens in the interactions between the addict and the non-addict is that when the addict goes into their emotional state, they tend to, again, get the unwitting spouse, family member, or whatever into their emotional state. As soon as there's two emotional people trying to communicate with each other, everybody's in their lizard brain. So in other words, you don't have to be using a substance to be out of your mind. All you have to do is get in touch with what we're talking about with this limbic system or the lizard brain or the addictive behavior. See, codependent behavior is just the opposite side of the same coin of addiction. And so a codependent who's out of control is acting just as crazy as an addict, but for different reasons. But they're still in the same part of the brain. The part of the brain that causes codependency is the same part of the brain that basically causes addiction. And when people are out of control with codependency, they're giving the addict money, or they're trying to lie to cover up for the addict, or whatever. That process is exactly the same process as the addict's going through when they're doing their addictive stuff.
It's as if we're contagious.
Absolutely. But, the contagion is, it's not like the addict really caused it or caused the codependent to start acting the way the codependent acted. Everybody sort of learned their role sometime far before the addiction really started. You don't make a codependent in a day. Codependent generally grows up in some sort of a family system where there's been codependency. They know that model. They know how to enable. They know how to fix things for other people. And again, as we've talked about in previous shows and that sort of thing, codependents tend to value their behavior. In other words, by helping somebody, quote unquote, they feel validated. And in fact, they might be killing somebody.
Right.
But on the surface, it either looks or feels to them like they're doing the right thing, even though it's exactly wrong.
Just, a little bit about the sociology then of Al-Anon, and just from my own perspective, I speak a great deal at conventions and meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous all the time. But of recent, I've been asked, and I'm very grateful to speak at Al-Anon. And the sociology is so much different in the way that I am received. When I'm received in Alcoholics, as joyful and laugh and all that. And not so much at Al-Anon, very serious.
See, again, if you're going to an AA meeting, those people have generally found what they're
solution.
looking for.
Right, yeah, right.
Generally, if you're going to Al-Anon, many people are still basically suffering with someone who's still active in their addiction. And it's a very valid sort of a thing. And unfortunately, I believe, and again, I don't have any statistics to back this up, I think that a lot of times when family members get sober, the other people tend to drop out of Al-Anon because it's almost like, well, they sort of gotten their whatever, which obviously is not really the way the program should work, because Al-Anon needs people that have been able to have their own spiritual awakening to pass the message on. And so, again, like I said, I'm not speaking out of really good data, but I really believe that happens. And I believe that the people that you see most commonly at Al-Anon meetings are the people who are still suffering with their disease.
And it's funny that you should bring that up. One of the comments I made, and you'll know this to be directly out of the book of AA, is the root of my problems are selfishness and self-centeredness. It was like a bomb went off when I said, people that just this enlightenment, they related to that. That's it, but it's so hard to identify when, it hasn't been brought to you right on the table like that.
Yes. And, one of the things you just talked about that kind of makes me think about this whole problem with AA versus Al-Anon, or AA and Al-Anon, is that if you listen in Al-Anon meetings, at least this is one of the things that I seem to hear is that just like people in AA meetings will tell war stories, the same thing goes on in Al-Anon, telling war stories from a codependent side of things. And instead of talking about themselves in an Al-Anon meeting, they will be talking about the alcoholic. So in other words, for an Al-Anon person or a codependent person, the alcoholic addict is their drug. For the alcoholic addict, in some way, that's actually sort of fortunate that they can actually look at a bottle or a can or a pill or a line of cocaine or something and say, this is sort of like where a lot of my problems come from. So what we're trying to do for people in AA is to get them to sort of separate themselves from the drug or substance and not glorify it. In Al-Anon, probably one of the things that we need to do more is to separate the codependent from the alcoholic.
Terrific. Dr. Joe Troncalli, I don't know what we'd do without you. Your help is just, it's insurmountable, and we appreciate it immensely. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with more of Trudge the Road here shortly from the recoveryforlifechannel.com.
You've been listening to Trudge the Road from the recoveryforlifechannel.com on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.